Jason White, House Speaker Pro Tem. Good morning, Jason. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Perez. Perez couldn't get viewed. Can he get Kosciuszko?
Well, there are.
I got Kosciuszko pretty good.
Right. What about Yakanukani?
Okay, you're on your own now.
Wait a minute. No, be honest with me. Which ones do you have trouble with? And you can, we're native born here, so. Carrie.
Yeah, and John Reed wants to say "Go Che" all the time.
Go Che, yeah. Instead of and when you have to say "Sosure" and "Go Che," "Sosure" and "Gosher," it's just a little complicated. Well, look, I didn't call you in there for here or ask you to come by for that one. I do have a couple of things here aside from just to let you co-host with me here for a second. The border thing. Are you watching some of the stuff going on at the border?
Paul, how can you not watch it? I mean, everybody's watching it.
As Jason, as a citizen here, I mean, this is catastrophic.
It's catastrophic. Look, I am in campaign mode in my House district, and so coffee shop hopping and all the spots, and that is the topic of conversation among the old guys sitting around the table drinking their coffee. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're worried about. Yeah. It's right before our eyes. I guess things unfolded in history long ago that we didn't get a front row seat in technology, and now you're sitting there looking at it, and you're like, why can't smart people do something about this?
Do you think that we feel a little isolated from this, and shouldn't, of course, because, number one, we don't have to have the amount of influx of immigrants that other states do because our load already on poor people is heavy. And it would be devastating to us as far as our schools, our hospitals, already is. I think I think in some areas it is some of the pull on hospitals, and we're just not talking about it.
I think you're right. But I also think what you said to lead off that about the fact that folks think, well, that's in Texas and that's in Arizona, that's in other places besides Mississippi. But it certainly affects everything we do.
Let me give you an idea. Just over the weekend, at just one checkpoint here, they had 26,382 apprehensions, over 26,000. Those that got away, and I think this is a conservative number, 7,399. Now, the apprehensions, it doesn't say how many they actually let in after they apprehended them. Marijuana, 164 pounds. They got 83 pounds of meth, 66 pounds of cocaine, 11 pounds of fentanyl, 5 pounds of heroin. They seized $12,200, firearms, 3 sex offenders, a felon, a gang member. And that was just in one checkpoint that's coming into our country that we don't know how many got away from them. So
it's unbelievable.
When you start looking at those buses, and first of all, who's paying for those buses? I mean, the line of buses stretches, it looks like, for miles. And another thing too, if I'm right about this, over 90%, maybe even 95% are young men. Very few women in this whole caravan or caravans that are coming across, and that is tremendously scary. Well, you said you're in campaign mode. What else are people talking about out there?
Well, we polled 10 House races from DeSoto County all the way to the Gulf Coast, kind of sprinkled through. The top issue among, and we were in these particular polls, we were polling conservative Republican voters, folks that voted in Republican primaries in the last 3 to 4 election cycles. The number one issue in all 10 of those House districts that we polled was fighting back against crime and maintaining law and order. And the second place issue wasn't even close, which was, depending on the House district, was either guaranteeing election integrity or infrastructure, improving roads and bridges. Those were 2 and 3, but the number one issue in all 10 House districts.
Fighting crime.
Fighting back against crime and maintaining law and order.
That's and I'm not questioning the algorithms of that poll. I'm just saying, when you listen to the liberal media, the number one thing by far, you listen to some campaigns from some other people on the left, the number one issue is expanding Medicaid by far, almost 113%.
Now, again, remember, I was strictly polling Republican primary voters, so let's keep that in mind. But having said that, the issue that you bring up, or just lobbing the softball of improving healthcare in Mississippi, was 8th, 9th, or 10th in every one of those polls. That's where it was.
When we look back at the 2023, your analysis of that is just successful. I think it was. There are some things that they left off, and some things that went. For instance, the rebates or the tax reductions didn't happen, but we did at least put that money into infrastructure. So, but your thoughts on the analysis of the 2023? I haven't had you in since then.
Well, I would say, for an election year. Legislative session, when most folks say we don't do anything, I would say we did a lot. So, and part of that is spurred on by the fact that we continue to have these, record revenues or record surplus, which we're not normally used to in Mississippi. And so that in and of itself, makes politicians sometimes nervous and trying to come up with all ideas and creative ways to spend money. So that in and of itself had folks engaged because they were interested in that money and what we were going to do. And anybody from my preacher to my accountant will tell you, let me see where you put your money and we'll see where your priorities are. And so that's probably true for us as a legislature. And I would tell you, we put a whole bunch of money in infrastructure in the form of roads and bridges, and we put a lot of money in K-12 public education. In addition to that, we sprinkled a whole bunch of new dollars into our universities as well as into healthcare. So, and frankly, as a state government, that's about as far as on most issues we should go.
Would you, on this whole controversy as far as the Capital District and the relationship with Jackson and the people there and the mayor, et cetera, would you have done things differently there, or if you had to do it again?
Paul, I don't know how you do it differently. They can say, well, nobody consulted with us or nobody. It takes two to tango. They have to be willing to sit down and as of today, I have not heard the mayor or anybody in his entourage admit we've got a problem in Jackson. They simply say, you've starved us of resources. Well, I saw the reports yesterday about the water system, and the audit had gone back, I think, 20 years, almost to, the beginning of this millennium. But and so certainly that was before Mayor Lumumba took office. But it includes his time as well.
Well, it also includes his father's time. So.
That's correct. And when you're not collecting your water bills, I just don't know how you can expect to run an efficient and good water system. For example, but my point on 1020, and you raised the question, I don't know how you bring folks along when their answer is no. We're not going to look over here.
Did anybody ever come to you and sit down and they made the effort to come to the legislature and say this, to sit down, or did you guys offer them to come and meet?
No, just in talking to our colleagues in the House who represent parts of Jackson.
Yeah.
And then eventually, with some of the senators, at some point it became, oh, look, 1020 is just so toxic. I don't care what you do to it now, just because of the name, it's going to be toxic. Y'all need to trash that, and let's start over next year and do something different. But what was going to change next year? Are we still going to be in this?
And people were going to be the crime.
That's right.
Going to continue to escalate.
Another year of just rampant crime, and we're all just going to look the other way and pretend like it's not happening. And regardless, it is our capital city. And I was telling you, I was visiting around my district the last couple of weeks. All of those folks, my folks live an hour from Jackson. Most of them come here to see a doctor or a specialist. They come here for other things. So they're a little more plugged into their capital city, than folks would otherwise admit or say. I mean, it is for Mississippians.
What he's talking about, and if you haven't heard it, State Senator or State Auditor Shad White's office released an analysis of the past 20 years of audits of the city of Jackson, and it's not good. Our analysis of Jackson's audit shows serious and fundamental financial issues that have to be straightened out. Every concerned taxpayer should be reading this report, said the auditor, Shad White. I'll give you some of the things that they found out when we continue our conversation. And visit with the Speaker Pro Tem, Jason White, coming up in a moment or two. He's District 48. Also at 8:05, we'll go to Whit Lewis, Vice President of Children's Programs, Palmer Home. May is National Foster Care Month. Let's not forget that. Back with more next. Hang on. I want you to hear the president real quick here. Just, I think it's important here, right?
I honored a group of trail.
No. You got to kick it up a little bit louder because this is good. This is our president of the United States of America, and I'm sure he just had the necessary amount of Red Bull.
I honored a group of trailblazing artists with National Medals of Arts and Humanities. Mm-hmm. The group included groundbreaking Asian Americans like Vera Wang and Joan Shingang, I'm going to pronounce right, Shanga Kawawa. I think I pronounced it correctly. She can call me Joe Biden.
Man, Jason, brother to brother, we're in trouble. We are in trouble. This guy is, he's gone. I mean, physically and mentally, you watch him and you think, you don't want this guy just being a crossing guard for your kids at school. It is, I have no idea how we get out of this one, but, and again, he's running for re-election, so it's going to be interesting. I was mentioning before we broke that State Auditor Shad White released this analysis on Jackson, and it has some disturbing things for our capital city. Despite a population loss since 2003, Jackson's revenue continues to increase. So wait a minute. The first thing that a layman would say, wait, you got more money, less people? Then number two was continued revenue increases are being outpaced by expenses. Wait a minute. You have less people, but you got more money, but you also have more expenses. Then the city's largest source of revenue is property taxes. It's being paid by fewer individuals because they keep raising the taxes. There's been an explosion of unpaid water bills. It's chaos. Nobody has any idea what's going on. City accounting treats many of the bills as if they will never be paid. City's not collecting its water bills. It does not collect all the water bills. It does not have the revenue to fund day-to-day operations. The general fund and Siemens settlement dollars are footing the bill to keep the water system functioning. There's been a large increase in water connections added by the city too. There's no leadership, and they can complain all they want to about not or taking over as far as the judicial system or the Capitol Police, but the people in the city of Jackson need some help.
They need some help. It's a lack of leadership there, and you know, when the water and the garbage goes, and you know, we can argue about the crime and the root of it and the causes of it and what we can do to help with that. But you can't argue about the water and the garbage. It's a lack of leadership. There's been no acknowledgement of it. And the mayor's only rebuttal yesterday was, yeah, but the federal government and Joe Biden, they didn't take into account the $600 million the Fed sent us. So the answer is, you know, well, they sent us a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm. Well, the frustrating thing about this is that the response is targeted more to their power base and their control than it is the people and any productive solutions to the problems. And I don't know where you go from there. I mean, the outcry has to be from the citizenry. It can't be from people outside before they get the message, and that's very difficult to do. Let me go back to the Medicaid situation, too. When we look at it, because we're in an active race, as you said, you're foot leather now, you're hitting the ground, as your colleagues are, and you hear that the $250,000, $245,000 has been given to Brandon Presley from the Mississippi Hospital Association. We had Tim on, and I'm sure you're aware of what's going on, but your comments on that?
Well, I would say to some extent, most trade associations, whoever they may be, whether it's the hospital association or, the bankers or the realtors or any number of associations you want to look at, they tend to support candidates that support issues that are important to that particular industry. And for the hospital association, for better or worse, they've gone all in on Medicaid expansion. Now, think there is a growing group of folks on both sides of the aisle that are willing to have the conversation about what do we do about what some call the working poor in Mississippi. I would call you the working folks who fall in that hole between an employer who furnishes insurance and they obviously make too much money to qualify for Medicaid. I do want to try to figure out a way to find a solution for those folks. But that won't save the hospitals and what's going on. And so that's why I don't understand why they've gone all in on Medicaid expansion as being the thing. And now they are finally saying now, well, that's not the silver bullet. It's not going to fix all the hospital issues, especially with rural hospitals. It's not going to fix all of that if we simply expand Medicaid. But they still are rabid about wanting it. And I heard Tim Moore tell you specifically, well, I've got a board I have to answer to, and that's probably true to some extent. But I just disagree with going all in on one candidate on one issue. I think issues with hospitals statewide are so much more than Medicaid expansion. And I have hospitals in my district that are members of the association. So, I'm going to have conversations with the association. I just don't know how you go all in on a Democratic candidate in Mississippi and say, well, this is our issue and we're going to die on this hill for better or worse. And, I think that's ultimately what caused folks to start jumping ship. And he doesn't need me to tell them how or, counsel them on how to run their organization. They know best how to do that. And certainly he does have a board. I just, it's not the end all be all. And so I don't know why they found it to be that way.
Jason White is the Speaker Pro Tem. But inside politics, though, you have to figure they're not going to spend $250,000 and throw it, especially, and the thing that exacerbates this a little bit is that you've got a supermajority of Republicans who just gave the hospital associations $103 million, plus another $1.5 million tornado damage to some of the ones who may have experienced some damage from the Rolling Fork tornado or wherever it happened to be. And not only that, you have a governor who signed it, a Republican governor who signed it. So, that's kind of a slap in the face, but you wouldn't do that unless you thought there's enough movement by Republicans in the House and more so in the Senate, and the only stumbling block to that is the governor's office. So they must feel like I don't know how they feel. Are better.
We hadn't had conversations about that. I would tell you on most any issue, if it takes legislation, you should be at least talking to legislators, House and Senate members, because that's where legislation comes from. I know we have, the governor does a really good job, and there's lots of pomp and circumstance around bill signing ceremonies, but all of that's way after the hay is in the barn. The hard work and the developing legislation and corralling votes to get something passed happens in the legislature. And he's good at, weighing in and taking credit and making the most of that. And I don't blame him. If I was sitting over there, I'd do the same thing. But those issues come from the legislature. So I thought part of it is, in other words, if Brendan Presley woke up tomorrow and he was governor, he can't pass Medicaid expansion. And the votes don't exist in the House or the Senate today for it. I do think folks are willing to have a conversation. I just say that whatever that looks like comes from the business community, comes from the small businesses of Mississippi. They're going to come up with a solution that we're going to help them do. I don't think they've checked the political winds and said, hey, we've got the votes in the House and Senate. All we need is the governor's mansion. I think they simply found a guy running for governor who is on their talking point, and by God, that's the direction they're going. Yeah. And look, they're big boys. They make decisions and live with them.
Their best shot, and they took it. Basically, what you're saying.
That's all I can figure. And the chips fall after that, right?
But you've not had any conversations as long as you've been Speaker Pro Tem and Philip Gunn. You guys, back when we had some summer sessions on this, we've had conversations on Medicaid expansion, but no definitive ones. Am I right on that?
You're right on that. The issue, I just say, you've got a Republican conservative legislature, and if anything comes from that in that vein, it's going to come from the business community. It's not going to come from a hospital association who is demanding it.
Final segment, final thoughts coming up next. Call guys like me. I have one question, though, just on the Medicaid, and it bugs me, and I'm just going to toss this question out to you. We have, 750,000 people on Medicaid in the state around?
Yes, high sixes, around 700, yes.
About 700,000 people. Would moving 200,000 to 300,000 more people in the state of Mississippi, many of them employed now, with their own insurance through the workforce or wherever, off those rolls, in other words, they no longer would be paying through Blue Cross Blue Shield and things such as that, would it cause an increase for the people who are paying for insurance? There are a lot of people who said those companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield would increase to the remaining force, almost like those remaining taxpayers in the city of Jackson taking the load.
I'm not understanding your question, Paul. Moving them off of what insurance?
In other words, many of these people in that expanded areas already have insurance. Well, do they not?
This is not about those folks. This is simply, yes,
you're talking
Medicaid.
You're talking about an expanded means people who are making more money than to qualify.
If you expanded Medicaid per the traditional, Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it's affectionately known, if you, in that traditional sense, yes, it could actually pick up some people who are covered in other ways, and they would drop those and go on to a Medicaid roll. I don't think there's any appetite in the legislature for that sort of expansion. That's why you hadn't seen anything happen. What folks are willing to have a conversation about is the folks that aren't covered. And that's what we would have to guard against if there ever was a plan developed to bring businesses in.
All they have to do is just drop the insurance that they have, and then they would qualify.
Yeah, under a traditional expansion. But that's what I'm telling you. You won't see a traditional expansion of Medicaid in Mississippi. At least, we were talking about elections earlier. We've got, the legislature makeup is not going to change that much this election cycle, regardless of which Democrats and which Republicans are elected. We've got, of the 122 House seats, 56 of those are unopposed. 36 Republicans and 20 Democrats are unopposed in the House of Representatives. And then another 36 races will be decided in either a Republican or a Democratic primary. So you're talking about 92 of the 122 races. It'll be over in August. So you're not going to see this, you're not going to see Democrats gain 10 seats or Republicans gain 10. Republicans may actually gain 2 or 3 seats, but the makeup's going to be about the same. We're going to maintain a slim supermajority. And so if there's an answer to this question or it's acted on in any way by a Republican supermajority in the legislature, it's going to have a conservative spin to it, whatever it is, and it won't look like traditional Medicaid expansion. So that's where you asked the question of, and let me say this, the Hospital Association does do a whole bunch of other things besides deal with Medicaid expansion. And so, members throughout the state have hospitals in their legislative districts that are members of the Hospital Association, and they enjoy a relationship with their hospitals absent the politics of one huge donation to a gubernatorial candidate. So,
as the speaker, if you are elected speaker, your thoughts on the CON, the con situation, because I think these two things are connected.
Well, not just certificate of need, but scope of practice issues. The working folks we're talking about, I think all of that stuff plays into one, all of that comes out of the same deal. They're going to have to be addressed. I think the CON issue is very complicated. I think it takes time to peel that off. You can't ask folks to conduct their business under this business model and then just pull the Band-Aid off all at once. I think you got to do that over a short period of time. But if you're going to start peeling layers off, you've got to do it incrementally and strategically, I think. But I do think you will see major movement on the CON issue over the next 4 years.
Why is it that complicated, though, Jason? Because I really don't understand that. It seems in an area that is void of that service.
Well, that's
then
a
that
place.
service should be able to be put in there without a COA.
I agree, and I think that's the first place you'll see movement on the certificate of need issues, or on those specific.
Yeah, it's not competing
issues.
with anybody.
Yeah,
It just seems to be common sense.
That part's common sense and easy. The hard part is where you have asked somebody to go invest $5 or $10 million to build some sort of clinic, freestanding, whatever it is, under this set of rules that have been in place for years, and then tell them tomorrow after they've invested piles of money and say, well, forget all that, you're out. Your investment now has changed. So those are the ones I'm talking about. May take a little time to peel off, but I tell you what you could do. We could pass a bill that says they all go away in 5 years, and then folks would come to the table and we'd get some real brain power figuring out how to do this methodically and right. So that may be the thing to do.
Going to be interesting. Always interesting to have you on, sir. I thank you for taking the time and coming in.
Thank you.